Here it comes.
Hey, hello.
All right, you're back on there, Mr. Florio?
Back on. All set.
Thank you, Mrs. Florio.
You're welcome.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Coventry School Committee to order. I have 6:02. Could we have a roll call, please?
Kathy Patnode,
Here.
David Florio,
Here.
Luke Murray,
He's absent.
Donna Kalunian,
Here.
James Pearson,
Here.
Craig Levis,
Present.
John Cowart.
Here.
Great, thank you. So I guess we can move on to our agenda item number 2, which is the budget workshop. And I guess we can start with a moment of silence, however. So if we could have that moment. Thank you. And I believe, Mrs. Kalunian, if you could do us the honor to read the mission statement for Coventry Public Schools.
I sure can. The mission of Coventry Public Schools is to inspire, support, challenge all students in an inclusive community to be critical thinkers, effective communicators, reflective learners, responsible individual, and global citizens.
Nice.
Moving on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented / amended.
I second.
Any questions before we vote? Seeing none, could we have a roll call vote, please, Mrs. Martin?
Catherine Patnode,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Donna Kalunian,
Yes.
James Pearson,
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 4-0. So moving into the budget workshop, Mr. Levis, did you want to start this?
Seeing I'm good, Don and myself are going to carry this tonight, so
I know there's no Mrs. Mangiarelli. Oh, boy.
she might be in the wings just in
Might be,
case. This
just
is like
in
$1
case.
million question and she'll be a lifeline.
Ah,
But before I get started, I'm going to put a couple of slides or one slide up on the screen. I just
Okay.
want to let the committee know that I received a phone call yesterday from the interim town manager, Mr. Wazika, and he had informed me that on the 22nd, the council is most likely going to vote on the budget calendar and move the budget calendar out a month. We did submit our budget last Friday, the summary budget. We did indicate that we were going to ask the school committee to vote tonight on a budget, knowing that we still will have to reduce the budget, but we wanted to be, meet our timeline. So I just want to be clear about that. So that's what I was informed. I'm sorry.
Do you have more details about what it means to move it out a month?
I do not. I had a literally less than a minute phone conversation.
Okay.
So I can get more information about it, but I really didn't.
Well, they're voting on it, so it's good to know. Okay.
They're going to vote on the 22nd, but I have
that-
no problem. I'm sorry.
So another question on that, sorry, is they haven't voted on the budget calendar yet, and per the current budget calendar, we are set to deliver our preliminary 2021-22
Correct.
budget tomorrow.
Correct.
does-
We're going to, yeah.
Does that mean that we have another month to work on that if
Well,
necessary, if needed?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think so. We want to meet the letter of the law with the charter, but I think as you'll see in the motion, we want to submit it knowing that, remember a couple of years ago, we submitted a budget and we just said, we're going to have to cut like 1.5 million on top of this. And that's kind of what we're asking, for the motion tomorrow, tonight. But this is a fluid document. We're going to be working on it, whether or not the budget calendar's pushed out a month.
Okay. Thank you.
That answers your question, Mr.
Yes.
Pierce.
Thank
Okay.
you.
the only thing I do know is I did talk to Ann and she said definitely the FTM and the referendum is going to be in June. So it really is, I think the whole calendar will go with that. So
Yeah, I mean, that's my assumption, but again, like Mr. Pearson said, there'll be.
You don't know until it's
I
voted
don't,
on.
right, I don't want to
I don't know
make
if
any
that's
assumptions.
I don't know if that's legal. I can't wait to see that because I don't even know if that's legal per the charter, but we'll
Yeah.
see what they're up to.
Okay. So I just wanted to clarify that. So, obviously this is a fluid process, and, tonight we gave you this information a few days ago. We delivered the budget book. So let me put the slide up, and then I'm going to go through the budget book with you. So hopefully I can. And this is posted, our documents, so we can put them in a more user-friendly format, but they are posted on our website so that if individuals want to look at this information, that you're able to look at it. And again, this is just the first of many public conversations we'll be having about the budget. So let me see if I can do this. Oh, goodness. Present. All right. So obviously this is the easy page to look at. So before we get into the document, these are just, as we go through this budget process, just want to highlight some key points. We still don't know what the state education aid is. We're making assumptions that it'll be level funded. We still don't know in terms of our federal funds, in terms of our grants in stimulus aid. We know that there was an aid package that was approved by former President Trump, and there was an aid package that's been approved or will be approved by this current administration. And it should be significant amount of funds, but we don't know, a couple of things we don't know. If you remember when we got the CARES Act money, that for those first funds allocated for schools were scooped by the state, and then they used those funds to supplant state aid. So in fact, our state aid had been reduced. We only had access to those funds a couple of months later. So we don't know if the state will do the same thing. We're hoping that they won't. We're still requesting 4% increase in local appropriations. And, we showed our documentation in terms of how we got here. This didn't just happen overnight. I think Ms. Mangiarelli, our I don't know what we call her now, our consulting finance director, did a phenomenal job putting together, with the support of others, that slide that showed those key years where we were pretty much level funded when the state had indicated we shouldn't have been. Again, not pointing the fingers, but people need to understand how we got here. That we're just not saying we're going to ask for 4%, but in this current situation, we don't have a choice. So we have a projected increase in salaries due to contractual increases. We have some anticipated positions that may need to remain due to COVID. Specifically, we put in custodial staff are in support, but we believe that we need to keep the custodians. I don't see how we can go backwards when we were so poorly manned prior, and we had shown documents where we had lost 12 custodians over the course of 10 or 12 years. And then we also have included preliminary staffing requests from principals. Those have not been vetted yet. We haven't met. So just to know, we also have some, right now, what we usually present early on is a summary of our salaries. We have our new KeyNet software. We're still working so that we can transfer the 2021 personnel to 2022. So as soon as that's done, we'll be able to give you line item by person in terms of personnel. We're not able to do that yet, but we will do that as soon as it's available. Anticipated increases in expenditures. Again, we see out of district tuition. Out of district tuition is increased. I think right now we have about 55. I think Sarah had reported 50. And there's a lot of variables because of that. I still feel a big issue is because of what's happened the last couple of years with the budget. And, I would hope that people would fight for the budget, but, I see that people are tired. And I understand that they're tired, but it's still something we have to deal with and address. Transportation contract increases, our anticipated purchase services increases, instructional support software. And if people have questions, I think Don can talk a little bit about that. And most of our other expenditures are remaining neutral. So right now, our current projected budget deficit is $1,685,613. Now that includes, we put back in the salary, we did put back in the curriculum, director of curriculum instruction assessment. And again, just to be clear, we never said we were going to eliminate it. We eliminate for this year. But we know that in the long term, that's a crucial position. It also includes new positions that have been requested. So we know that as we go through and vet the budget, we'll be able to, reduce some of this deficit. The area that it doesn't include is our maintenance requirement. We understand this year how the maintenance was scooped from the state aid due to the town. If the bond passes, we will be fine with our maintenance. A lot of those funds will count towards our maintenance, and we will be fine if we go to bond for stage 3 for the building project. If it doesn't pass, this budget doesn't include. So the town needs to be aware that the state has said they will come back in and take whatever state aid is due. So again, the final statement here is that we understand we have to pass a balanced budget. And we will do that. We've done that every year that we've been here. But we know this is going to be extremely challenging times. So this is kind of just framing the budget discussion. Does anybody have any questions about anything that was presented in this slide? All right. Bear with me here. So what I wanted to do, I'd like to do now is just, if you have your budget book, I just want to go through with you and go through the different sections. And then we'll open it up to questions from the committee. So obviously in the first part of the section is the budget calendar, which my understanding is on the 22nd, that'll change. Then the second tab is revenue. The top page was revenue projections based on January 28th. And the next page were revenue projections based on as of January 14th. And then we attached, I believe, a document from Kristen Cole that talked about state aid. Kristen Cole works for the Department of Education. Then the next page is the summary budget. So then we get into the personnel section. And the first couple of pages are the new positions that have been requested. Now, again, these have not been vetted. We have not met with our administrative team. I want to be clear to go through those positions, but we will be doing that. You can see breakdown by the buildings. And as I said previously, we don't have the line by line in terms of salary. We don't have access to that yet. We haven't been able to roll over from 21 to 22, but they are working on that. I met with our HR director, Margaret Card, who's doing a phenomenal job, and she's still being supported by Andy, who's been very helpful in terms of transitioning. They should have that worked out with KeyNet very shortly. And the next section is our non-personnel, and that's broken into two sections. So one is every line item for expenditures that are not personnel related. And then the section under that is, and I want to thank Mr. Martin. We've taken into consideration, in fairness, with the way capital had been handled here and the fact that we didn't get capital. And when I took over, there were things that had been requested. We've been asking for the same capital. And I think it was Mr. Pearson that brought up a valid point that there's many more needs we have. And then when we saw the conversation about the impact fees and how those impact fees were being determined based on the capital requests that were being put forward, when we know that we have, our needs are great. In fact, the Jacobs report had identified them as about, 58 or 60 million. And I think that was supported by Studio Jade and Phil Conti going through that currently. So what we did is had Mr. Martin go through and we went over all the capital needs, and we've broken down a new list that using the same format going out 5 years. But again, that's something that, I want to present to the committee. We can talk about feedback, but we've added that. We did spend time putting that together. And again, I want to thank Mr. Martin. We used the information from Studio Jade in the Jacobs report, and there's some supporting information for that. And then the very last section is when we presented our draft budget on January 28th. Presentations. And so we'll build on this binder as we go through the process. So as you see, it's very fluid. We know that as presented, we have a deficit of 1.6 million. We also know that, and we've stated that when we finally submit a budget that's going to go before the town, it'll be a balanced budget. So that's just an overview of the book. I don't know if anybody, we can go back section by section. If people have, I feel probably the best way right now is to give the committee an opportunity to ask any questions they want, or Madam Chair, however you want to proceed. We know it's a lot of information. Mr. Coward is here to help answer any questions. But honestly, we've been through this. We've had opportunity to ask any questions we went through with Ms. Mangarelli. And I want to stress the fact that, she's been extremely supportive, working this, is very still committed and passionate. And we appreciate her support, but hopefully that makes people very confident too. This isn't just myself and Don putting this budget together. I want to be clear. We still have the expertise of Ms. Mangarelli, and so.
All I can say is thank goodness for that.
I concur.
Yeah, okay, so I guess we'll just go down the line. Mr. Florio, did you have any thoughts or questions?
Mr. Levis, as I went through the book, and I was checking on it just now, I saw a lot of non-instruction employee development and training, conference workshops and travel, and non-instructional organizational fees and training development. Seems to be a lot of that, Mr. Levis, and I'm just not sure what those what that means, and it's non-instructional.
Right, but we have a lot of components, Mr. Florio, that aren't instructional.
Okay.
We have, for instance, our, looking at software, our financial software,
Yep.
training for custodians, training that our HR is part of. There are many, if you think about all the different systems that are related to operating schools. So I don't know if you want to be, like there's non-instruction alarm and fire safety services, non-instruction internet connectivity. We can't code everything off to, remember with UCOA, it has to be broken down. So we can't code everything off to students, right?
Okay.
So it has to go in different categories. So I mean, if you want to look at it, or if you want to send some specifics in terms of,
There's a lot.
right, but I mean, we have a whole section on the whole,
Okay.
the non-personnel costs, and there's a whole section of non-instructional.
Okay. That's what I'm looking at then. That's what I'm looking at. That's all.
Like, for instance, board training, school committee, that's considered non-instructional. So,
Yeah, but if we don't spend it,
but with this,
If we don't spend it, it goes back into the budget and
Right.
it supports another line, David.
okay,
but you got to
Because
give
we
me some
probably
specifics,
won't.
Mr. Florio.
We probably
Non-instructional
won't.
legal services, that's our attorney.
Yeah.
okay,
I mean,
And I could give an example as well. So for example, the administrators all have in their contract a reimbursement for courses, PDs, trainings, and it's part of the contract that all administrators have. So it's budgeted every single year because it has to be available if somebody takes the course or takes a training or goes someplace. This year, I'll go on a limb and say we'll probably see very little of that, right? So that $1,200 per person
that
will
goes
just
back
end
in.
up. Exactly. But we budget for it because it's in the contract.
and I
I
think,
gotcha.
yeah,
Okay,
if you look across, Mr. Florio, I don't know which columns you're looking at, but you'll see prior expense, current adjusted
right,
budget. Then you go over and look at FY '22 budget request. So
Yeah.
for instance, there's one called Human Resources, and it has the non-instructional conferences, workshops. It has $1,200. That's in the
Right.
contract of the HR director. So
Okay.
I
okay,
guess my caution is making a statement that, like, I think what we need to do is, and if you want to, come in and we can talk to go through, so
Okay.
to explain to you, because I don't want the public to think we're throwing in all these non-instructional things that aren't necessary. So I would like to make sure that, whatever I can do to help clarify that, I'm more than willing to
well,
do.
that's why I put it out there, Mr. Levis, because if I'm reading it, I know the council would read it and they'd have similar questions or may not have similar questions.
Yeah, well,
But
I think
but at
that's
least-
part of the process, right, is for us, I mean, I
I
love
think you're being
questions.
I think
Yeah.
you're being transparent. That's why.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked the question, because I'm looking and I'm saying to myself, okay, if I'm looking at this ordinarily, I'd have no issue. But after what's happened, I just want to make sure you did a very good job explaining it. I just hope the public understands it too, So this way, if people come up to me and they say, because you know how it is, you know how it goes, people come up to you and say, hey, what's going on with this?
And you can always direct them to us, right? You can always direct
Exactly.
them to us. It's better,
Exactly.
I have no problem telling people I don't know. I mean, talking about having Sarah as a lifeline, I mean, you can't be more honest and transparent.
That's right.
But there's a lot that goes on in a public school system, right?
I know.
To support education. And we have a lot of workshops and training, or I won't even say workshops anymore, but there's a lot of training that goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
For our staff. So
I know.
in terms of the professional development piece. So,
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for the answer. Thank you, Mr. Cowworth. And thanks for the clarification. And thank you. Just want to make sure that to avoid any confusion, that you have the questions and that you're ready that the public is ready for the answers. Thank you, Mr. Webb.
and we're hoping that through the process and with the council too, is that they'll help us, based on our conversation, sell the budget too. So, I want to make sure that they understand. And so
Exactly.
I appreciate you asking questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Levis.
All set, Mr. Florio?
All set, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Colonian?
I don't have any questions at this time. I'm gonna move on and reserve the right to ask a question later.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Colonian. Mr. Pearson?
Okay. Thank you for everyone involved putting this together. I feel like we just finished talking about previous year budget because we just did finish talking about the budget.
We're going to talk about it again.
I know. It's perpetual, but it's
Budget
important.
that never goes away.
Yeah, the budget that never ends. Okay, I do have some questions. Probably in scattered order, so please forgive me. I noticed in the FY22 budget we're putting as a revenue anticipated spending $500,000 of fund balance. Can you elaborate on that? Why is that? I know we were asking for that for the 21 fiscal year. Why are we again dipping into fund balance for fiscal year 2022?
I think with even the 4% ask, that we're going to need to spend a significant amount of fund balance. I mean, based on where we're at, we're coming back based off of FY 21 level funded. We've requested, we put in that, not to get off the FY 22, but it impacts FY 21. FY 21 impacts that where, we put in a corrective action plan asking for money for the town. So as we build the FY 22 budget, we didn't see a way around using fund balance moving forward.
In previous conversations with the finance director, it was stated that after using the $1.5 million in fund balance for fiscal year 2021, we would be starting the 2022, the next school year. It's easier not saying it that way. With a I won't say dangerously low, but very low level of fund balance to be able to cover expenses. It could create a sticky situation as we start the next school year. So
Correct.
I'm trying to understand where that $500,000 even came from.
Where the $500,000 came from.
In revenue, like if we are spending most of our fund, if we're asking the town to spend most of our fund balance this year, the 1.5 million, and we were told, I mean, something may have changed. I'm just saying we were told that there would be very little fund balance left at the start of the next school year. Where is the 500,000 going to come from?
Well, I think that is coming from our fund, our assumption that that will be our fund balance going into next year, potentially.
Okay.
I know I'm not answering your question the way.
Yeah. If we can get a little more offline, I guess.
I'll get a better answer, but
okay.
I mean, we can't, fund balance isn't just going to materialize, right? So
that's my point. Yeah.
Right. So I can't speak on behalf of what Ms. Mandrelli had said before, but my understanding is that is potential fund balance we'll have moving forward.
Okay. Thank you for looking into that. Next question I have is around, it's in here somewhere, substitutes. I noticed that we're not, when we initially changed the rate of pay for substitutes, the estimated impact statement on that was around 500,000, and I'm give or take 100,000 or so. I don't quite remember, and it was just a ballpark estimate at the time.
Right.
So I'm not saying we have to stick to that number, but I'm noticing in our next budget we're only increasing the budget for substitute teachers, by under $200,000. Any insight into why that is?
Because we're hoping. Yeah, we're assuming that we're going to go back to more normal situation, right? So the increase for this year had to do with in terms of, it was all based on COVID and just getting supply and demand. But we're hoping to go back. So it's a $200,000 increase. But I think Sarah had also explained how, our budgets had estimated, but the amount that we ended up spending on subs was fluid. So we're hoping that it goes back to a more normal expectation next year.
Yeah, but
if
even
I'm answering your question, why we're going down from 500,000 to 200?
Well, that was probably a poor way to phrase it, but in our 2021 budget, we have about 755,000 budgeted, and we're only expected to raise that to 895. In the previous year budget, it was 860. So again, I'm concerned that with the rate of pay increase that we did for substitutes, which was significant, I forget the percentage, but it was significant.
95 to 145.
Yeah, it was about 50%. So the budget numbers here don't add up. So if we can look into that and make sure that we're not underfunding our substitute teacher budget.
Right, but we also plan on I think we're going back, that rate sunsets, I believe, at the end of this year, correct?
Mr. Levis,
does it? That's a question.
I believe that was in what we passed, it
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
It was for
When we
1
vote-
year. Okay.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
resolution was for that rate goes back at the end of this school year.
Oh,
back
good.
to the
Sorry,
original rate.
I forgot that part. That actually answers my question. Perfect.
Yep.
I'm gonna go back to that one. So going all the way to the capital budget, one of my favorite topics. For all my favorite topics, but this is one of them. Great job. I like that this is a little more comprehensive, or sorry, a lot more, not a little more. I don't mean to put it down at all. This is good. More comprehensive of what our actual needs are. I say this every year, and so it would be remiss of me not to say it again that I object to the wording of the sewer connection line item because with I think with Tioga, I understand there's an available sewer line there. The problem is it's a private sewer line, so we have to have some contractual protections. With the high school, it's the same situation. It's a private line going down that road. Therefore, I want to make sure we're not underestimating the need here. I don't know the condition of the septic systems at the high school in Tioga, whether they're ready for an overhaul or if that's further down the line. But I just wording it as just a sewer connection project when it might just be a sewer project to allow us more flexibility to say, are we able to tie into these lines, or do we have to dig up the leach field and put a new tank in and all that extensive process? I don't have
Right.
the answer. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure we have the flexibility to be able to do that. Because if we have to build, if that's not in our capital improvement plan to put in a new septic system versus tying into a sewer line, I don't want our hands tied.
No, that's a good point. I think we can do, we can look at doing more assessment around that in terms of looking at what the options are and how dire the situation. So
And can we bring
That's
Mr. Martin into the next workshop and have him be available to answer some of these capital questions?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
Mr. Levis, may I add something about Tioga Elementary School?
It's up to,
Madam Chair?
As long as I
James?
get my time back after Mr. Florio is done, I'll cede the floor to Mr. Florio for a moment.
Thank you,
make it
Mr.
quick.
Pearson.
I'll make it quick, Mr. Pearson. At Tioga Elementary School, when you're walking towards the entrance, if you look on the right-hand side, or if you walk on the right-hand side of the field, you hear squish, 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 and that's the septic system. It's gone. It's really bad, and they try to put a yellow line around it so the kids don't play on it because it's that bad. So I just want to let you know of what
And
I
you're
see.
right. I mean, if that's a situation, we need to take care of it as soon as possible. And I think that's why it's on here. We've talked about this a couple times already. I have no objection tying into the sewer line. It's just, again, it is a private line, so we have to make sure that we're legally protected for
Correct.
sure.
Absolutely correct.
We don't want to have a pond situation where all of a sudden we get a bill we can't afford.
Yes.
If you want to use that analogy. Okay, and my last thing is more of a concern than a question. I know the budget's fluid. I also the part of me that gets a little compulsive about details and making sure I'm voting on something that I believe in. Voting on positions. I know the new positions are thrown in here. I shouldn't say thrown in here. The new positions are part of our fiscal year 22 budget in this package. But the fact that they haven't been vetted out, and I know that takes time, and I know there's a lot more data points that have to come in before we do that.
Mhm.
But I'm just raising that as one of my points of hesitation of this is why I asked for that extra month earlier on. It's like, do we have an extra month? Because when they pushed up our budget timeline, when the all-day referendum came through, it's just this is too early. This is too early to vote on a budget, in my opinion, because we don't have all those data points. So voting on a personnel list for new positions that hasn't been vetted makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up a little bit. It's not something I'm entirely comfortable with. I know it's a necessary evil at this point. And evil is probably the wrong word, but I know it's necessary because of the timeline. But it's like, you know, maybe we can work with the town on establishing a permanent, better budget calendar where we don't have to be forced to vote so early on the process in a budget, when we really could use another 2-3 weeks, whatever it is. Another 2 weeks would even be fantastic, I'm sure. And again, that wasn't a question. That was me on my soapbox. So on that note, that's all I have for questions at this time. Thank you. And I look forward to the follow-up answers on a couple of those.
Yeah, I mean, we, and I appreciate those comments. I mean, I think we're trying to be transparent as much, you know, in terms of these are potential budget. My concern about pulling them out, because I think that caveat is, we know we have to balance the budget. I don't want it to be misconstrued that, you know, now we're adding to the budget, because typically we start off with a large number and we work our way down. No different than our COVID. You know, we present, this is what the cost could be. And you know, our experience allows us, you know, being fiscally prudent day in and day out, to have spent, you know, much less on COVID than we anticipated early on. So, I mean, I hear exactly what you're saying, and we could pull them out. I just want everybody to know that we may need to add them back in. And so, because, and I'm not saying this will happen, but you've seen in the past, you've all been there where, you know, this is what the school committee voted on, and then I may present. And so whatever the pleasure of the committee is, we just want to be transparent. Even in the motion later on, it talks about this is to meet the requirement of the charter, and that we will present a balanced budget. And remember, we cannot add positions without your approval.
And I think I'm not asking to pull it out, because I think the way you're doing it is actually the best way to handle it, and saying these are our you know, we're being open about that.
Right.
These are the personnel requests, not final yet. You know, we
Right.
have to have
No,
time
exactly,
before
exactly. And
council votes.
exactly. And Mr. Pearson, while we're still, you're still talking, I just want to say that the presentation that's in the back of the book, that I shared when we went through the book, it talks about fund balance levels. And it talks about FY21 use of surplus 1.5 million, then FY 2022 proposed use of surplus, and it has 700,000. And remaining unrestricted surplus 24,000. I think that's what Ms. Mangiarelli was talking about. We've tried to save, you know, if we used 2 million,
Yes.
if we use $2.3 million of surplus this year, we're dead in the water. And so I think that's what Ms. Mangiarelli, again, I hate talking about
Thank you.
Ms. Mangiarelli in third person here. But
I can't show it.
it was presented at the 28th. And you're right, she did talk about being very, very low in terms of our surplus. and wiggle room.
My apologies. The slide is in there. You're correct. And thank you for pointing that out. I must have missed that one
No, that,
in
hey,
these detailed slides we have, and it answers my question right away. And that's where I'm getting.
right.
I must have misremembered a little bit. So this explains the details.
There's a lot.
Thank you for that.
No, thank you. There's a
Yeah.
lot to this. And we know that we've taken on, so we have our own checking account now. And that's the part I think that Ms. Mangiarelli was stressing, that to have that little surplus, you know, when the charter says the town has to have, you know, X number of dollars, you know, and there's, if we do a performance audit, which my little plug, I hope we do, I think one thing will come back is it'll indicate that the school district should have this X number of dollars in terms of percentage of like 2 to 5%. So anyways,
Yeah.
thank you for those questions.
Having that little of fund balance left is still daunting. Yeah.
Oh, it's,
Very much
yeah,
so.
it's, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Florio.
may I ask one more question?
Of course.
Mr. Levis,
Mr.
I've
Florio.
been, Mr. Levis. Hello.
I'm here.
Okay. I've been hearing a lot about state reimbursement and community reimbursements to charter schools. Have you heard anything about that?
No,
That the
but it's
state,
not, I don't know if it relates to FY22 budget, Mr.
yeah, I think it does, because if the state requests that we no longer fund charter schools, that would have an impact on our budget, correct?
I don't see that as happening. The state
Okay,
doesn't have funds, so I don't know.
I
Yeah.
don't either, but they're talking about it at the State House. I don't know with the new governor coming in if he would do that, but that would give us quite a savings.
Yeah, I don't
So
see, I don't see that.
I don't
I
see it
mean,
happening either.
Well, I don't see it as something we consider right now. Like I said, you know, the state on the RIDE website has us getting more money than we planned on receiving for state aid. And we were advised by the Department of Ed to at best plan on level funding, which we did. So I think if that happens, that'd be great, but I do not see that happening.
Well, that could be a good question for our legislators. You know, so
Yeah,
anyways.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Florio. So I don't really have any questions. I want to thank everyone, Mrs. Mangiarelli and all the other people that worked on putting this budget book together. It's very comprehensive. I really love the year-to-date spending and the expected expenditure and how that relates to the budget. All that information is really critical in trying to analyze and understand the budget. So the only thing that gives me makes me stay awake at night is the fact that even with the 4% anticipated revenue coming from the town from taxes that went into making this budget what it is even now, we still have to cut, what was it, $1.6-ish million? So that's a heavy lift for us, obviously, even in the best of times. And if we don't get the 4%, then we're really going to be in tough shape.
Yeah,
So, yeah, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I just want to say that, and I can talk a little bit about it when we get into FY21 budget, but it pertains to FY22 because Ms. Mangiarelli brought this up when we met with the Auditor General.
Yep.
It was myself, Ms. Mangiarelli, Mr. Coward, I believe, correct? We met with Mr. Gorham, the town solicitor, Mr. Wazika, the interim town manager, and there were several people from the Department of Ed and from the Auditor General's office, but not the Auditor General himself. And one thing that was loud and clear that was stated by Department of Ed and Auditor General is that they recognize that Coventry public schools will not be able to cut their way out of this with mandates and requirements, and knowing, because Sarah did a phenomenal job giving them a history with all the supplemental documents about how we got here and what we've been doing. So they encouraged the school department and the municipal, the council, the school committee to work together to try to fix some of the systemic issues that are behind why we're at. So, you know, I just want to frame as we're talking about this budget, and this is our preliminary numbers. And you and I, we've had conversations, I've had conversations with other individuals that, you know, it's going to be difficult to cut 1.6, you know, so, but we're going to continue to do what we do every day, you know, budget for us and probably for every district. It's a daily occurrence. We look at the dynamics, the variables every single day. And so knowing that the new positions are included and it's 1.6 is much better than saying we have to cut 1.6 and oh, by the way, we may need some of these positions, right? And what we've done since I've been here, I can say, honestly say, is we've kept that laser beam focus on what's in the best interest of kids. I mean, to the fact that we didn't have sports this year, and because Ms. Mangiarelli reached out on her own and was able to negotiate a deal, we're able to do more than just sports and activities, put other things back. So, you know, we're constantly looking at, you know, you dealt a deck of cards or hand of cards, and we're working with them, you know. So, you know, I'm not going to, you know, and we're going to look at other strategies too to get people more engaged in the process. The budget. That's something that we know we need to do. Because when push comes to shove at the end of the day, I still have people that told me they didn't even know the referendum took place, you know, who had received. And so we will come up with different strategies starting as soon as we come back from vacation to get awareness and involvement. So I promise that. So, but I appreciate the feedback. And like I said, if you have questions, if any of the committee members have questions, I know Ms. Clooney, if you see something, you feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll make sure Mr. Coward gets back to you as soon as possible.
And the other thing, I was wondering if someone in central administration, I don't know if Sarah could do this for us, what our fund balance has been over the last few years. I know that we had a lot this past year that we kind of rolled over into 21 because of COVID savings.
Yeah.
But I don't remember it ever being that kind of an amount. And
Yeah.
so, and then the second thing is, I'm not exactly sure, and I've been on school committee for a long time, if we had a surplus of 200,000 or 300,000, I was always under the impression that the school department per charter was not allowed really to keep that fund balance unless there was a bill that we had to kind of pay that we'd been putting it off, like the school lunch program, for example. But that we really couldn't keep a rainy day fund, sort of, so to speak, on the school side. But I'm not sure if that's true or not.
Yeah,
And so this
I
talk
heard
about
that. Yeah.
the talk about fund balance, I think can be confusing as to like where it comes from. And if it is allowed, if we spend less than what we predicted, you know, how much, I mean, I think I've been on committee when we've had a mere 20,000 left after the end of the year, so to speak. So I'm just kind of curious how high it ever has been.
Yeah.
And how low it's been. I mean, I know that since I've been on committee, we have never run a deficit. That I do know. We do not go in the hole. There have been some cuts that we had to make that have been horrible, obviously, but we always came within the guidelines of the budget that was set by the people of the town. So I'm just a little curious about that. And
so I know Sarah has said that we've never had a fund balance like this. This is purely due to COVID.
Yes,
right?
that's what
and I think that schools aren't supposed to have fund balance. Like, for instance, before the town gives it, we'd have to spend our fund balance.
right.
But I do remember, and I think this would, you know, this will indicate that we probably didn't have any fund balance, because if you remember, part of the issue with our healthcare was we had borrowed over the course of X number of years, $1.2 million. Right. There's a reason why we contribute and get to a certain amount. We got, you know, when Sarah came on board, we were extremely close to, you know, not having enough to cover since we're self-insured. Right. We built that back up. And I think to her credit, that's why we are looking at level funded for both healthcare and dental. So, you know, again, I want to thank her for doing that. But there was other years that those funds had been used. And for instance, we would have had to pay off that debt. We should have paid off that debt.
Right.
We had fund balance. So I can get specifics, but I don't believe we had significant amount. And you can go back to what's been audited, right? In terms of our reports. and see, because they would have what our balance would be. And I've never seen any significant amount of funds.
I
Again,
haven't either. Yeah.
This is truly because of COVID and the
Right.
savings, and I don't foresee that happening again. People say, well, maybe we go out, if anything, I want to bring people back in. It's going to cost more money. So
Right.
I think this is a one-time anomaly that we're experiencing here.
Yeah.
Can I just add one thing to that?
Yes. Yeah.
So at the end of the school year, when June comes and then we transition into July and we're transitioning into a new year, there are expenses that we have that come up at the end of June or come up at the beginning of July, those funds are used to kind of get us into the new year and to pay those expenses. So for example, being the curriculum person, I may go to Sarah and say, there's this new product. And, if we do a 3-year deal, we get a discounted rate, but we need to sign on by this, July 5th. And if we don't do it by July 5th, we don't get it. And Sarah may say, well, we can actually make that work. Sometimes we can't, but this year we can make that work because I can take these funds and I can apply it to that. And then that will get us, the 3-year discount. So she uses those monies to get us from June into July so that we can keep operating, because all our bills come due July 1st.
Right.
That's the cycle we're on. So all these programs, everything we have run until the end of June, and July 1st, all the bills come in and we start paying them all back out again.
No, I get the need of having, because of cash flow issues, that you need something there to be able to pay those bills that do come in June before the new year starts. I just wanted to bring it up because I think it's confusing sometimes to the public. When we use the word fund balance, they automatically think it's the town's fund balance. They don't think it's the school departments. I've had people ask me that question actually this week. And I've said, no, we don't have any ability to just put it on our budget sheet that the town is going to take X amount from their fund balance to give to us. That doesn't happen. And so that's why it kind of came up in my mind. And so the other thing that's troubling, though, when you look at FY22, is that even if we have $500,000 toward a fund balance, from the fund balance that the school department has, how often can that be? I mean, it's only because of COVID that we even have that money in reserve, because of some of the savings. So it makes me feel like there's structural deficits that are coming even greater than what we had originally anticipated, i.e. in fiscal 23, we may not have anything left to put against that for a fund balance. And so I would like to see sort of where we've been in the past during normal times when COVID wasn't the big issue, just to see what that trend is, because that just opens up another structural deficit. I know we're using it. That's how we're getting through this year, obviously, is from savings from last year. But sooner or later, it's gonna hurt us even more on our maintenance of effort, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But
Well, I mean, that's how we got here. I mean, I think
I know.
that one slide that Sarah had put together over that 6-year period of time was very telling. And
Right.
I know a lot of times people say we don't want to go in the past, but we have to go
Yeah.
back to understand at least how we got here.
Right.
And I think that, I don't think the town can take our money if we have surplus. It's not like but I think we can be forced to spend those funds.
Yeah,
right?
but
So we
I do
can't-
remember, I think we've spent it on things that were outstanding bills, like the school lunch fund is a perfect example. I never thought that we had a lot of money just hanging around. But whatever, if we could look at that, because, it'd be nice
right.
so the public would see that.
Just to think about how challenging the times have been, but we've been able to take care of certain debt. We've been able to put money back into our healthcare so that we don't have to have an increase. And that a lot had to do with COVID too, because we're self-insured. But I think we can't lose sight that despite the challenges we face, we're still in a position where, we get to live another day, I mean, so we're still working hard. And, I am optimistic with the how the council's been handling things in terms of, working with us. But we're going to continue to do due diligence moving forward.
And then, and the other thing I was going to say is, Sarah predicted this. She told us this. She said before the last referendum, if the referendum passes with maintenance of effort and everything else, here's what we'll be looking at next year. If it doesn't pass, we're going to be looking at a much bigger number. It didn't pass. We're looking at a much bigger number. So this is not like, oh no, we had no idea. She was
Oh.
pretty clear with the community the whole time that if it didn't pass, we were going to be deeper in the hole. So we're deeper in the hole. So now we have to figure out how we're going to dig out of that.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Levis. If there aren't any other questions from the committee, I guess we can move on. Yes? Again, I look forward to more work on this budget, obviously, and to look at the new budget calendar, if it does in fact get voted on, what our dates are for future workshops with the town council and with the public. Because I think the town council did have a Saturday session for both of us to work on the old budget calendar. I think there was a Saturday work session that had been put on the calendar. It was an extra day added to the budget calendar as opposed to what has been the traditional one. So hopefully we'll have more time to work with the council to explain our needs, and they can explain theirs as well. So.
In Madam Chair, I just, I don't know if this is the format, but I feel that I know our meetings can go long.
Mhm.
However, I felt that, there's a lot going on, people have a lot going on in their life, and to put our budget workshops prior to a school committee meeting, at least in the beginning, might make sense instead of setting different days. I mean, if the committee's okay with that, then we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I like the
So,
idea.
um, So anyways, that way it's easy for the community too, because they don't have to have separate days, the more times we meet.
Right.
So we'll continue to do that. And
Yep.
like I said, and I agree, Mr. Pearson, with you wholeheartedly in terms of the budget and the process, but I feel that, this is the most transparent way to do it. I hope people feel that way, that we're not trying to pull a fast one on them, and we're being transparent. And like I said, over the next couple of weeks after vacation, we'll have an opportunity to meet with our administrators and come back and have them come. Most of them are here tonight too. If there's questions, I'd ask them to come. But anyways, so I want to thank you for the questions and for your support. I truly believe, I go into this just believing that this community does support education, and that's how I'm going at this. And, what we've done in the past, this year just didn't work. So we're going to try something different. But I do believe the people out there do care, do want to support, and we just need to find different ways to engage, and I'll be the first to admit I don't have all the answers. But we're going to find different ways to engage the community. Try to find, we talk a lot about with students and with our staff, we talk about champions, people in our schools that champion children's causes that other people look up to, and we use them as catalysts for change and for growth. And I think we need to do the same thing in the community, identify those champions. And I'm going to be reaching out to the principals and asking for those champions in their buildings and meeting with them and, trying to pull together a grassroots, because I think that's what we need to do, not wait till the referendum, but, we have another month, we have time to do that. And I would ask too, the committee, if there are people in the community, we need to pull them together and attack it this way. So anyways, I appreciate your time and support of the budget process.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. I think we're all looking forward to working on this diligently. So I guess we can move into the public agenda. And the following agenda items, just for the public attendees that are here tonight. If there is a motion, you will be allowed to ask questions on every agenda item. If we make a motion before I actually call for the vote, I will ask for public input. And I guess that's it. So I believe number 4, is that number 4? We're going to table from the agenda,
Yeah,
correct?
I don't know if we need to vote because there's nothing to vote on. I know it does say
Yeah.
discussion vote, but I have nothing. I haven't presented anything to vote on.
So we're just going to table
I
it,
don't think
right?
you have to vote to table it.
No, so we're just going to table that. So we're going to move on to number 5, which is the school improvement policy, which is the first reading. I believe it was our reference number 3. I guess we can just take a quick motion to dispense with the first reading. Is there
Madam
a
Chair, I
motion?
make a motion to dispense with the first reading of the school improvement team policy, CFDA.
I second the motion.
We have a motion on the floor. Are there any questions from the committee on this particular policy? I'm sure you've had a chance to read it.
Can I just say a couple of words? I don't know if Mr. Pearson
Sure.
wants to jump in. Again, I want to thank Mr. Pearson. We had a policy meeting tonight and, you know, Mr. Pearson, Dr. Dixon, Sean Clough, who's been working with us on doing a phenomenal job. And I think tonight was like 104th meeting that we've had in, in less than 5 years. So about 4 years. So that's amazing. And this was based out of the change in the regulations in terms of governance. And it really delineates the role of the school committee in terms of the school improvement team. So this is the first reading, but I think it's very clear. You know, it's important, I think, for the committee to understand their role in this. And we'll make sure that we work with our administrators and our educators to understand this. It's much more comprehensive, obviously, than what we've done in the past, but
Right,
I think it really stresses that point of governance.
right. And I believe this is per the state law that was passed, correct?
Correct.
That we had to change it, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, are there any questions? And again, thank you. Mr. Pearson, did you want to say anything?
Oh, nothing to add. I like this policy. I think it'll help foster some additional community engagement in our schools. So it's a good thing.
I agree. Anything from the committee? Mr. Florio? Any questions?
No, I agree with Mr. Pearson completely, and I agree with Mr. Levis completely.
Thank you. Mrs. Colonian?
None.
No, I don't have any either. Are there any hands up? Does anybody that is out there in Zoom land have a question for us or a comment?
Hands are up.
All right, thank you, Mr. Murphy. Then I believe we can have a roll call vote. Mrs. Martin, please?
Catherine Patino,
Yes?
David Florio,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-0. And I assume it's already posted on our website for the public and or will
Should
be?
be under the policy as a draft, so.
Great, thank you. Moving on to number 6, agenda item number 6, the motor vehicle no idling policy. Mr. Levis, did you want to talk about this?
Sure. So we had discussed at the last school committee meeting that there were several policies that need to be drafted to support our stage 2
Right.
submission. This is one of them. In fact, Mr. Pearson sent me, so this is just a policy, right? So we write policy. There's a lot of guidance and guidelines that'll be supporting this. There'll actually be signage we'll have to post, and that'll be my job to put that together in terms of administrative directive. So this is needed for our stage 2 submission. And I want to thank again the policy subcommittee. We've the last 2 meetings we've drafted for the policies that have been needed. So this is one of them.
And I believe the next one might be as well. Mr. Pearson, did you have any comments as the policy committee subcommittee?
Nothing to add. Nope.
All right, thank you. So could we have a motion to dispense with the first reading?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to dispense with the first reading of the motor vehicle no idling policy ADFB.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? It was our reference number 5. It was a fairly straightforward policy. Seeing none, are there any hands up in the public? Mr. Murphy?
No hands.
All right, thank you. Then I guess we can have a roll call vote, please. Mrs. Martin?
Catherine Patino,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to number 8, which is the legislators meeting, which is, I believe, next Wednesday, correct? February 17th. It was, we had a reference number 6.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
You missed
Mr.
one.
Florio.
Energy Star policy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss that? Oh, sorry. Whoa. Thank you, Mr. Florio.
You're welcome, Madam Chair.
Crossing
catch.
off my agenda items before I know it. Oh, you know what? I put your name and Donna's name in the wrong place, so it doesn't take much to get me off task.
That's okay.
All right, moving on to number 7, which is the Energy Star policy, our first reading. Mr. Levis, did you want to speak to this one?
I don't know if Mr. Pearson, I don't want to take all the thunder away here. If you would, you don't have to, I can. This is just, again, a policy that we needed to put in
Thank
place
you.
for, it just basically says that we will use, energy efficient, Energy Star rating, which is an actual rating when we purchase appliances or certain components, and that we have to commit to doing that. Again, it's about energy efficiency, cost effectiveness.
Yeah, we have some additional policies coming up that are also about energy efficiency. So this is one of the suite of policies we have.
Great. Okay, thank you. So can we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to dispense with the first reading of the Energy Star Policy ECFA.
I second the motion.
Right. Any further questions from the committee? Any questions? Again, thank you, Mr. Pearson and Mr. Levis, for the work on the policy subcommittee. Are there any hands in the public, Mr. Murphy? I don't see any raised hands.
There are none.
Okay, thank you. So that I can call for a roll call vote, please. Mrs. Martin?
Catherine Patino,
Yes?
David Florio,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to number 8, the legislators meeting, which is next Wednesday. This was put on the agenda so that we could come up with any questions that we might have for next Wednesday's meeting. And Mrs. Dixon, President Dixon from the Town Council, needs our answer by this evening so that she can, in fact, work at posting the meeting on tomorrow, because Monday is a holiday. So that's why it was critical that we got this done tonight. So starting with Mr. Florio, any questions that you would like to raise at the legislative meeting?
Yes, Madam Chair, I just raised a question about the mandated funding from the school department for charter schools. If the legislators are looking for the local school departments to charter schools, or what's the status of funding charter schools?
Mr.
Because,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I just said, I think what you were talking about, and again, I apologize for cutting you off, but I think what you were talking about is there was a moratorium on funding new charter schools that goes to FY, I think, 23, 24, that the Senate passed. So I think that's maybe what you were talking about, that they're not going to approve funding for additional charter schools.
Okay,
I think that's what, I think that,
that could be it. That could be it, Mr. Levis.
I think that's what you were talking about.
And
Was
I'm
that
not even sure if it's funding. They're just not going to allow any to go forward.
correct?
There were some that were actually put forth, because it has to pass through RIDE regulations to be actually approved. And there was always only so many you could do per year or whatever. But the moratorium is to stop any future proposals. It has really nothing to do with us, quite honestly, as a local community.
Okay,
Anything
thank you.
else?
That's it.
That was it.
That was my
Okay.
issue.
All right. Mrs. Colunian, anything for the legislators? You're on mute.
I know we bring this up every year, but I really want our legislature, I want them to take an active role in getting something done about the funding formula. I think, and I know we bring it up every year, and it never seems to resonate with, our reps, really. So that's my thing. I think that we need to do something about the funding formula, because if we don't, we're going to constantly be behind the 8 ball. They need to do a little bit.
Sure.
Okay, I know they have had some committees look at changing how they fund, looking at the actual calculation. So I think the best proposals that I've heard have actually had something to do with charter schools, in the sense that our tuition for one of our students follows a child to a charter school, they get the whole piece of money that we give to every student. And yet, and in that tuition basically that follows the child, with it goes all of our special ed needs,
Right.
all of our, those kind of things. And yet most of our charter schools until just recently typically did not service
I know.
IEP students. And so
Right.
they got the full amount from us, even though most of our students that went to charter schools were not IEP students. And so that's a real deficit that there needs to be more weight put on that formula piece to give back.
Yeah,
So
that's what I mean. Just kind of,
Yeah.
look at what it's actually doing and, make it better, I guess,
Yeah.
for lack of better words,
Mr. Cowett?
I do recall from last year's meeting, they also talked about some sort of stabilization so that, or for lack of better terms, maintenance of effort, so that it wouldn't swing from one extreme to another, because you can be up 1 million and down 1.5 million the next year. I think it was Gordon Rogers, if I remember, who had talked about serving on a committee. They even had something they had drafted, but I think I don't know where it went after they drafted it, that had worked in some sort of like 3 or 4% stabilizing calculation, so that even if your funding formula changed due to the property increase, that there would be some sort of stabilization, so you wouldn't see such extreme changes from one year to the next.
and it makes sense because, I mean, cities and towns have the maintenance of effort. Why wouldn't the state have something, because basically everything's falling on the backs of the cities and towns, and that's what I think people are getting upset over, is the fact that we have to keep raising our taxes to cover the schools, and the state's just cutting everything. It's like they cut us a lot of money this year. They cut quite a bit, and that's just my soapbox anyway.
Yeah, unfortunately, the money is based on free and reduced lunch
Yeah.
population, how many students you actually have in the March date or whatever that is. So I definitely think we could ask for our local delegation to push to make sure that this past year's data is all over the place
Oh, yeah.
and cannot be used. I mean, I think that's why they're saying probably it'll be level at best. But we don't know what's going to happen. If they try to use the figures from this year, it's going to be an impossibility to try to make that fair across the state. Kids have fallen, through the cracks and whatever. All kids are getting, there's no real incentive to sign up for free and reduced lunches, because all of them are basically free, I
Yeah.
believe. So, I mean, that's a problem for all cities and towns. So I think every local delegation needs to be aware of that and be ready to fight to say, please don't
Yeah.
mess with that. The problem with the funding formula, it's based on the assessment in your community and how much, but
I know.
it's looked upon on all the 39 LEAs, or how many we have, because some of the charter schools are LEAs as well. So it's based on that, and we have no control over that. It's not like the state says, well, you know what, Coventry, we're going to just cut you this year arbitrarily. They cut because they say our property values have gone up, our medium incomes have gone up. We may have lost some free and reduced kids, whatever. So it's all based on that, which from looking at it, it looks like it's somewhat fair. It's better than it used to be, where,
Yeah.
where you lived and how strong your delegation was and how much power they had, they got a bigger slice of the pie. So they tried to do something better, but it still needs to be tweaked. I think the problem with the swings, though, is that we don't know what it's going to be. We don't know what our assessed value, we don't know what all those little numbers are going to be when they
That's right.
finally give us the new number. And to try to tell a community, well, hey, you're going to have to get that from your citizens, nobody complains when it's too much. Like if we
Right.
if we got a million more, we're gonna say, oh yay. But the swings on both sides are what, is hurtful, especially if it's a loss, because then they're telling your citizens need to be taxed higher, is basically what it comes down to. And most folks don't understand that in our community. They have no idea why we've been cut, really. But that's really what the state is saying. There's only so much pie that the General Assembly is going to give the Department of Ed, and then it gets, proportioned
course,
off.
The sad part is that we wouldn't be where we are today had we not been level funded in prior years.
By our own town, exactly.
Right.
So,
right.
but you got to remember those years we were on the high side, the giving end. We were a winning district for those years. So the town, unfortunately, didn't have the vision to say sooner or later that's going. I mean, I think the state said that all along, and we tried as a school committee to say, yeah, I know we have got more money this year, but guess what? It's not going to be forever. And so the
that's what happened.
Still has to give us something. But unfortunately that didn't happen. So, but I agree with what Mr. Cowett said, and I know there's a hope, and I know the town council talked about this as well. It's the swing piece that is so deleterious to a community. And so if there's some way we could be eased into that change, that would help. And I don't know how they would even go about doing that. It's a difficult question, I think. But if we could get them to say that they would smooth the numbers across all cities and towns, and not allow that huge fluctuation. There's something wrong with that fluctuation. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
So, but I definitely think that's a topic we need to bring up. And I know the town council, that was on their agenda item as well. So, we definitely will bring that up. And
like I said, it's the elephant in the room.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Colonian.
Thank you.
Mr. Pearson, do you have anything?
Yes, but before I do, I want to comment on what you both said, because it was great conversation, great discourse. There's so many facets to it. I'm not even sure our General Assembly is capable of handling how many facets there are, because we're upside down. Rhode Island is upside down. There is a disproportionate burden on the local tax base when you compare to other states versus how much school funding comes from the state. However, that would be fine if they gave us the more authority to deal with it, which we don't have. It's all in the General Assembly's hands. Everything. If we were modeled more like Massachusetts in this regard, and I think this is something that's half on the council agenda, and I say half in a couple different ways, read it as you will. Massachusetts has Proposition 2.5, which probably just made Craig cringe. But with Proposition 2.5, even though it's a 2.5% tax levy cap, it allows for growth, meaning if your tax base increases, it doesn't affect your cap. Exclusions include capital. You can spend capital and it doesn't apply to your tax cap. And there are also some exclusions for certain bond payments, things like that. If we were closer to that, I'm not saying it's perfect. Oh, the other big important thing of this is the community can override it if they so choose to in advance. We don't have that power. If we want to override our 4% tax levy cap, the General Assembly has to decide. We don't have the authority to do that as a community, which, is good and bad. I guess there are pros and cons to that. To me, it's more cons. I like pushing authority as locally as possible. I don't need someone from Providence telling me what my taxes should be. Although they sure do suck up a lot of that state budget for schools. So I like I don't like calling it MOU. The reason there's MOU at the town level is because the legislature has control over the schools and they can enforce that in the localities to have a maintenance of effort. I like the word stabilization, and that's something to more ask for. But again, to do that kind of stabilization does require change, probably requires changes in how we're taxed as well as how we're funded. And they have there's a lot smarter people than me who can figure that out, I hope. But we should definitely mention stabilization, in my opinion, to the legislators, because these massive swings in what we're given from state funding really, we have these massive swings. They say, yes, you can, to your point, Kathy, yes, you can tax your people more. It's like, well, no, we can't, because we have a 4% cap and don't allow us to increase our levy. So it's not functional the way it's set up currently. So that was one of mine. I have, let's see, what else did I say? What did I want? I had a couple of fun ones. There's a bill on the books. These are, I think I mentioned this to Mr. Levis earlier. There's always, when we used to do these, I remember previous superintendents, sometimes they would address, current bills that are on the table and say, look, we like this one, we don't like this one, we like this one. We've gotten away from that in recent years. And maybe that's something we get a little bit more into. There's a bill on the books. It's House Bill 5078. And it has to do with suspensions in K through 5. And someone is actually pushing that you can't suspend a child in K through 5 until you put a behavior plan in place. And I don't know who thought of that. I didn't write it down, but to me, great idea in concept, because you never want to have to suspend a child. You want to give them the supports that they need. But, if there's a danger to the child or a danger to the peers or the staff, I mean, sometimes you have to remove a child from an environment before you can create that behavior plan. And this, I think, ties our hands and is going to create a lot of chaos in our schools if that passes. What else did I have? In previous years, this is what I've been kind of harping on a little bit lately. In 2019, there was House Bill 5817, which is very similar to what New Hampshire just passed, and that has to do with teacher-student relations. I know we have a policy on this, but the gaps in our policy are in that it becomes an internal discipline matter, whereas if you have a bad actor somewhere, they're able to go get a job somewhere else. So this law would actually start to increase, the legal ramifications for those kind of inappropriate relationships. So that's something I would hope our legislators would want to reintroduce and support if they haven't done so already. And the one I mentioned last year, and I know it's in litigation right now, but I think they need to repeal House Bill 5437 from 2019 that passed. And that's the Evergreen Contracts Bill. It's just, we need to restore some of our management rights as a school committee. So those are the ones I had in mind.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pearson. I only had a couple, one being the funding formula and the swings, and if there was a way to, like you say, stabilize it, and or find a way to somehow smooth those big swings across all communities. Because obviously there's only so much money, and so they have to figure out how to distribute that. And I'm not sure, like you say, I'm not an accountant or a math wizard, and I don't know all the fine pieces of the funding formula and how that could be worked out. But I think it definitely has to happen. I do believe also the council is going to be asking for the change to 30/50 to allow growth to come into the equation on how much we can, how that works on the 4% cap. But I think that's really an important issue. The other thing is that I would like to hear, I know there, like you said, Mr. Pearson, there have been years where bills have been brought forward by the individual local delegation as to what bills they want us to support as citizens or ask our opinion about those bills. So maybe one of the things we should ask is, what is your goal as a legislator? You represent us. What do you think you need to do to do the best job for the citizens of your district, and see what they have to say? It would be interesting to kind of hear. They might bring up bills. They might say, I've sponsored this bill and, we're hoping it's going to pass, or it'll just be interesting. And I think we might want to leave that sort of as an open question. I know we have a limited time with them, but I would like to hear from them instead of them hearing from us and then kind of, not maybe saying too much or whatever. I
Oh,
want
that's
it
a
to be
great
a
idea.
productive meeting. Huh?
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So we probably should do that. If everybody's okay with that, you're okay, Dave?
Sure
Donna?
am.
All right, Mrs. Colonian? Yep. And outside of that, Mr. Levis, I know that there were some bills on the table that the Principals Association or the Superintendent's Association were looking at. Are there any that you think we should ask them about?
I think there's one that has to do with this year, hold harmless. I think it was discussed.
Yeah,
Someone on the committee just discussed that. I think that's important. It
yeah,
has to do with the numbers and the funds and 2019 data versus. And then the other one that I had sent separately was the CTE.
oh,
bill
yes.
that- And what's important, I think, to know is that some of the, because I remember the conversation, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but there were a couple of reps that also represent, Foster and, obviously we know Pontiac is a winner in this whole thing around pathways, but I think it's important to know that legislation that I shared was co-written with the input of Mr. Mike Barnes, who's the superintendent in Pontiac. So I think they need to know that. So their superintendent, which I am also a superintendent in the community they represent, but we both support that. And basically that says if you have similar programs, then the expectation for if regional career center, then students would have to go to that program. And right now we're paying for students that we have programs. And I had a letter from a parent says, well, but about activities and sports and facilities. And, my approach is like, that's why we need to invest in, if you live in Coventry, we need to invest in Coventry. And it goes back to our budget. So those are two that I think. My only question is that I think we should narrow down, again, if it's a yay, nay, just saying support. But, again, I applaud Dr. Dixon in trying to, push this forward and really keep it specific so that we can have there's some accountability, right? So that we can have a conversation, but then, okay, these are the next steps, because that really doesn't happen. Because it's only been 5 years. You've been here much longer. Not a lot has come out of this. And your time's valuable, all of our time's valuable. So I think if we can streamline it, then the better. I love the idea of asking them what their goals are. I think that's a phenomenal question because they were elected to represent these communities. And, I'd like to know what their plans are to support the cities and towns and school districts. So, but those are, I think the CT I'd like to present to them because it's legislation that exists and, the districts support that. The RISA put that together and came to consensus. So, but I don't know in terms of, I have like 6, 7 topics here, and then adding them, so I can just type that up and
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
share that with, I'm sorry.
If Mrs. Dixon says that that's too many, we can, maybe she and I can discuss it
Yeah.
or whatever.
Perfect.
I was a little confused about one thing too. Are we going to share the same agenda items? I know we're posting the meeting as well, correct? Or
Correct.
and so do we just want to I don't know, I'm not sure what she has in mind as far as running it. So if they have 3 items, let's say, and we have 3 items, or are our 3 items going on her agenda as well?
I'll get, how they post is how they post. I'll just make
Right.
sure, not, because I have no control over, but I will run by, we have to post tomorrow. Whatever we
Right.
come up with, I'll run by Mr. Anderson just to
Yeah.
get his, I know we want to be, when I first came here, sometimes our agendas were very vague. And, with his guidance, we've been much more specific.
Right.
I even was concerned, we had a policy meeting before, I wanted to make sure, that's why we have attorneys present, and I want to make sure that, the last thing I need to do is to violate open meetings,
Yeah, I'm not sure what President Dixon has in mind, but there's a reason why she wants our agenda items. So
Well, the
there's a
reason is-
very good, I
Yeah,
think
to
she's
share.
gonna,
Well,
I'm
the-
sorry?
I think I had shared that email with everybody that the reason is that the legislators don't want to be blindsided. They want the information. They want the
Right.
information ahead of time. So I had indicated the earliest we could get it because we needed to have a conversation.
I guess my point is the process piece. I was under the impression she wants to add our agenda items to her main posting, but I could be 100% wrong.
I think they
So-
did that last year. I think that was
Yeah.
done last year, but I think we just posted ours.
Yeah, okay.
But
All
I
right, I was
believe
just
that,
curious.
I believe the council added, they had a long agenda and a lot of items. I think this year we're trying to streamline it so we can have, more depth, less breadth, I
Okay.
guess,
Yep,
conversation. But, so I'll type this up and I'll share it with you, Madam Chair, tonight.
all right, okay.
Then we can send it to Dr. Dixon, and then I'll get, see how we'll post it, work with Mr. Anderson tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good. All right. There looks like there is someone with their hand up in the audience. So, Mr. Murphy, could you bring them in, please?
Yes, I can. Okay, Josh, you're up. If you could state your name and address for the record and unmute your microphone.
And I think I'm on mute. This is Josh Clements, 10 Gentry Farm Drive. I just wanted to say thank you for the collaboration working with the town council. I think the goal here is to keep it, short and sweet for the legislators. Sure, they're short on time. So I think we're aligned on the stability piece. Town council is looking for the same stability in school funding. I had also recommended to President Dixon, it sounds like we're aligned here as a school committee. What are the legislators doing for the town of Coventry? How are they going to support us in the financial troubles that we are working through? And I'll add one more House resolution and or bill that's out there. It's H5227. This will establish a new tax bracket for the top 1% of income earners within Rhode Island. I think it's pretty clear that the residents of this town do not want to see their property taxes go up. So the money's got to come from somewhere. The tax rates on the top 1% within Rhode Island has not gone up in several years. So I'd ask for the school committee support to have our legislators support that resolution. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. I don't see any other hands, Mr. Murphy.
That's it.
Okay. All right, I guess we can move on to item number 9, which is the approval to submit the FY22 budget as presented in order to meet the municipal budget calendar requirements. Discussion and vote. So, Mr. Levis, do you have anything else to say about this, or should we just call for a motion?
No, I think we had I think we've addressed, unless the committee feels otherwise, I think, the most pertinent point, I believe, was what Mr. Pearson brought up about the staffing, but I think we've explained that, and I want to be transparent going across, sending this across to the town manager, interim town manager tomorrow. And, I think, again, there's a lot more that's going to take place, especially knowing that this is going to be moved out a month. So we have, I agree, we have much more time now to vet this and come back and, make sure when we make cuts, I think it's important to recognize that we look at what's going to have the least impact on students. And unfortunately, with the budgets we've had, there's no way around impacting, it's been a hardship on everybody. So, but that's the lens we use going into this. So I think we've covered it, and I would ask the committee to take on the motion.
Okay, do we know if we really have to vote on this because the budget thing is changing, or we
well,
still need this date?
Because it hasn't
Get it done.
changed in the charter. And again,
Okay.
I went before the council. I know it's a different council, but it came up that the school committee had not voted. And
Okay,
even when we sent the preliminary summary budget last Friday, we indicated in an email Ms. Mangarelli did to the town manager that the school committee would vote on this on Thursday night. So
Okay.
I would ask you to vote on it. And again, I think the motion speaks for itself.
all right,
Point of clarification, the February 12th date, I don't believe is in the charter. This has to do with the original budget calendar that the council already passed.
I'm sorry.
So
Yeah.
we're just making sure we're compliant with that
Yeah.
resolution.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you.
yep, great. All right, if there aren't any other questions, because I think we did have all the questions on this budget already discussed, I can call for a motion. So is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the FY 2022 budget as presented in order to meet the municipal budget calendar with the understanding that a final budget recommended to the council prior to any public hearings shall be a balanced budget.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Any further discussions or questions from the council? Seeing none, are there any hands up in the public? Mr. Murphy, I don't see any.
There are none.
Okay, give him a minute there. Okay, it looks like we can call for a roll call vote, please, Mrs. Martin.
Catherine Patino,
Yes,
David Florio,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
okay, thank you, everyone. Motion carries 4-0. Moving up to the next agenda item, the FY21 budget update.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
I'll try to be brief. I had mentioned that we had a meeting with the Auditor General, and I think, it was very clear that the intent of the outcome of the meeting was that the recommendation was, for us to work together with the town council and to take a look at some of the systemic issues, see how we can rectify them. A point I want to I'll make up Freudian slip. A point I want to bring up is that, we had talked about, we need to provide a corrective action plan. Our corrective action plan was to submit the budget, which was voted on by the school committee in terms of the FY21 budget, which included $900,000 for COVID funds from the council. It was clear that the Auditor General's office had indicated, because it was brought up in that meeting, what if, what about the bond rating in the town? And if we were to give money and it affects the bond rating, and what was stated by the Auditor General's office was that the bond rate, they look at the town as a whole. And so it isn't going to be just, well, the municipal side's okay and the school department's having a deficit. They're going to expect that the town would work with the school department to eliminate the deficit. So that was stated at the meeting. So we received, on February 4th, I received an email, I believe I shared it with the committee from Mr. Wazika through Dr. Dixon, asking for information. And again, I shared with you this morning a lengthy email that I thought was important, and Ms. Mangarelli was the major author of that. I made some minor changes, and I want to give her credit. But I think it's important for the community, and I think it's important for the council to understand where we've come from this process. Because part of it was, well, where have we made cuts? And there's nothing new in that. Anybody that's tuned into any of our meetings and in the council and the committee, it was just a summary of everything that we have done in terms of cost-cutting measures and how we've presented a consistent budget and need. And even though we actually were able to reduce our expenditures, we talked about $3 to $5 million. We thought that would be our additional funds we need for COVID. We're able to draw that down through our experience. So I think it was very, very comprehensive. And so I'm hoping that we have an opportunity to go before the council and that they will fund our need. We asked for that additional $900,000. Doesn't take into consideration if we're to go back, if we go back to school and bring more students back, which is my intent, at some point. And it could cost us more money. So, in the council, and I'll say the previous council, has offered to support us with COVID funds. We've done due diligence day in and day out to reduce our expenditures and to be as cost effective. But the only money we've received additional is the $740,000 that we received from the federal government. Again, we haven't received anything from the town. We haven't received any additional funds for the state. So I applaud everybody in our district that's working so hard to continue to keep that laser beam focus on students. But, just to see, where we've come and where we're going. And so we sent that off to Dr. Dixon and to the council and town solicitor, Mr. Anderson. And I'm hoping that we're invited to a council meeting and that at some point they take a vote to support us with COVID funds, because that is our corrective action. I don't want to hypothesize of what will happen if we don't get those funds, but there'll have to be some action that we take. So I just wanted to summarize where we're at. And again, I'm very hopeful. I appreciate the support that the council has given and their positive outlook and attitude. We're waiting to hear. I was told that I should be hearing from the town manager. I did have a conversation with Ms. Patno about a conversation with Dr. Dixon, and just want to make sure that we move this forward. It's really difficult to pursue and move towards FY22 when we're still in this position that we're in with FY21. But again, I want to applaud everybody for their efforts in working hard. And, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're going to do what we need to do to ensure the funding necessary to get us through the end of this year. And we'll put as much effort as necessary to move forward in FY22. So that's my short, long-winded way of summarizing where we're at right today with the FY21 budget. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments for me.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Mr. Florio, did you have any comments or questions to Mr. Levis?
No comment, no question.
Thank you. Mrs. Kalunian,
None.
right? And Mr. Pearson?
None at this time.
Thank you all. I guess I should ask the public if there are any questions about that discussion. I do not see any hands up, Mr. Murphy. What do you think?
There are none.
All right. Then I guess we can move on to number 11, which is the superintendent's report, the COVID update testing. Mr. Levis.
So I want to thank our nurses went to, I know we've taken some time. I know other districts are in the process, but I want to make sure that, our buildings, our key people in the buildings that are doing that will be facilitating the testing, our nurses, we're comfortable with what the plan is. So on Monday, several of them went to Providence. They picked up, I believe we picked up around 2,500 of the Binax now tests. They last for about a month, and they did a training. And so we are in the process of developing, we're using other districts' forms, but we're going to have opt-in forms for testing that'll need to be completed just once. By both students and staff. Our plan is to start when we come back. So we'll get those forms out as soon as possible. Our plan is to start when we come back with our staff and with our athletes. I'm going to have a administrative directive to our athletes that we're going to require them to be tested once a week. I've discussed this with Mr. Anderson, I think, especially because our athletes are not a stable pod. They're coming and I think this is in line with what other districts are doing. It'll also be a good way for us to work out any difficulties that we have. And then the following week, we'll start working with our schools, our elementary, our middle, and our high school. They've submitted plans. The gold standard is if we can test 40% of our those willing to be tested in a week. I'm not sure if we'll hit that. But we may be able to test 10, 15% at a time. We're still going to have to identify some staff. They're going to be helping in terms of checking individuals in. The schools have worked out different scenarios for quarantine. If somebody is identified as positive and how we can isolate them so that they're not, infecting the population. So that, I know I had said that we have plans posted, but we will get them posted hopefully next week so that people understand what it's going to look like. But first things first, we're going to send out these opt-in with an overview so that people know what they're actually opting in for. So, it's taken some time, but I really can't thank enough our school nurse teachers and our support RNs and our administrators and staff that have just, I know people are anxious and they're looking forward to this starting. I think it's going to help us with, much more confidence in our buildings. Right now, several of us attended a meeting with the Education Operations Center, who's a combination of RIDE and Department of Health. We attended a meeting yesterday, and they said the positivity rate was about somewhere between 1.6 and 1.9% overall. So we're hoping that most of our families will support this. Again, but I want to thank our staff for all the effort in putting this together. So that's the first part. The other part is that I sent out, I worked with the nurses on Monday, and we came up with a change in terms of quarantine for travel. RIDO has flexibility. We've been holding firm with 14 days for travel. I met with the nurses. We talked about, and to be frank, I know that there are many people traveling over next week. And I don't want to be, as superintendent, just reacting to people coming back, maybe not telling us that they've traveled, and the possibility of that people infecting others, whether it's, could be a student, staff, could be anybody. We also know that, you think about Rhode Island, at one point was one of the highest. You can't go to other states, but you can maneuver around your own state. You can go shopping. And a lot of this doesn't really make sense to me. I'm not, a health expert, but I know the Department of Health does offer options in terms of how we look at quarantine for travel. So what we came up with, what we felt, one of the options was you test 3 days before you come back. But we were concerned about that. So what we came up with, and it's supported by the CDC and the Department of Health, was, and I sent an email out yesterday, and if I didn't send it to the school committee, I apologize. Usually I BCC you, but I might not have, and I will as soon as this meeting's over. We've allowed individuals to test when they come back. And if they show a negative test and they have to turn that in, so staff would turn it into HR, we'd ask families to turn theirs into the school nurse teacher, and then individuals can come back. It's always been an option to test, but we've held tight to the 14 days. Many states are starting to come off of that red list every day, which is a positive. So they will have to, and we also gave them the list of states, which is constantly updated. That was in the document. And also the Rhode Island portal.gov, where you can schedule a test 7 days out. And my hope is that people will be honest about this if they're traveling. And I know there are people that travel to New Hampshire, and again, I'm not a super sleuth. I don't go searching Facebook, but many people do. And I don't know why somebody would post that they're going here on Facebook, knowing that they have friends or people in the school district, but they do. So for me, it's about getting out in front of this. Again, I want to be honest about it. I don't want people coming back and pretending and then having the opportunity. So our recommendation, or they have to be tested, have a negative test before they can come back. The other part is if people were forced to take the 14 days, or staff to take the time out as a sick time, my concern is we may have staffing issues, right? And I do not want to have to utilize or use that as a reason not to have classes in session. So I think when we looked at everything, we felt this is fair. Again, I worked with the nurses, but they supported this. As much as I'd like something to take place, I would never give a directive to the nurses. They're our medical experts, and they've done a phenomenal job. They're working 24/7. I mean, I've been on the phone with 5:45 and 10:45 at night. They really are. And not that others don't work as hard, they do, but they've taken on so much responsibility. So we've changed that. Now that's only for travel. There has been no change for close contacts. In fact, we're hearing that if somebody, even if you're vaccinated, but you're become a close contact, you still need to quarantine. So we haven't changed the quarantine for close contacts. I know that's frustrating for individuals, but again, I'm going to remind people, we've had students come in when there's a parent at home who's tested positive. We've had students come into school that had tested positive. We have students that are tested who come into school while they're waiting results. And these have been very clear. These are not acceptable behaviors. And yet we can't control this. We've had, again, those students that have come in, all of a sudden they test, they find out that they're positive, but they've been in school during the infectious period. So we're working as hard as we can to keep schools open and to increase the time students spend in school. We need everybody's support. And the last thing I want to say is that I am going to be looking, I don't have a timeline. We are finishing up the work that was identified by Creative Environment Corporation and Jeannie Reddy, the consultant that came. We were able to just secure a balancing expert, and that balancing means they come in and they look at each of the units that are in the classrooms. Like I'm sitting in my office and I have this unit against the wall, and they are going to go in, they are adjusted individually. They're going to spend about an hour and a half, and they're going to look at how they can maximize the amount of fresh air that will be brought into the rooms. And as we go through that process, we're going to make sure that we can have maximum amount of students in our rooms. There may be rooms where they're not able to balance it appropriately, so we have HEPA filters that we will put in those rooms. We're fortunate that the EDOC, again, the Education Operations Center, and we have one of our parents, that's the director, Kristen Danushis. She was able to help us secure 160 HEPA filters, which actually can address double the size of our classrooms. And we also received 90 what are called air scrubbers. And they do the same function. They're a little noisy, but they actually paid for covers to be designed, like fiberglass covers to the noise. So we have quite a bit of equipment that if we find out some of our rooms need assistance to make sure that we have 15 cubic feet of fresh air per individual, we can do that. So that work should be done over the next few weeks. And then, I'm going to look and meet with our administrators, meet with the union and talk about how can we transition, can we transition back more students? We all know that we want our students in, but we want to make sure it's safe for everybody. The real last thing that I'm going to talk about is vaccination. I have no knowledge any more than anybody. I get asked all the time, when are we going to be vaccinated? What I do know is that physicians, the first responders and all those identified in like congregate care, they were in tier 1. What's happening now is it's really going to be based on age. And then, so they're going to go, 75 plus, 65 plus, and then individuals that have one or more or two or more, high risk conditions, whether you have hypertension, diabetes, asthma. And so what they're saying is over time, in phase 2, it should cover a lot of educators. But my understanding is educators, even though there are 24 states that have prioritized educators, Rhode Island is not one of them as of today. And so I don't have any inside information. In fact, most people probably know before I do. But I just wanted to be clear about that. It would be lovely. It would be fantastic if we could get all of our staff vaccinated. I truly believe that they deserve to be vaccinated as much as many other individuals who have been identified, because they're on the lines every single day dealing with our students, with each other. We know in our elementary schools that there is no 6 feet opportunities whatsoever. So as soon as we do know, I do know if I hear of something, but that's my understanding with the vaccination. So, but we do, I get emails sometimes and talking about, just, how challenging it is for students. And we know that, and especially some of our high school students, we want to do everything we can do to get them in. We want to make sure it's safe. Like I said, so we're having that work, that final work that needs to be done in many of our classrooms to make sure that we can bring students back, and then we want to make sure it's the right time. We still have to work out issues with transportation. To my understanding, that they haven't reduced. It's still maximum of 50%. So there's a lot of things we still need to talk about. So I don't want people thinking, oh my God, Mr. Levis is going to be bringing students back right when we come back. But we are having certain conversations. I've talked about wanting to bring back 6th graders. We're going to take a look at that. But again, we're not going to do anything unless we can ensure that the classrooms are safe as we can make them. And I want to remind people, though, we've had, since September 14th, we've had classrooms of 23, 24, 25 in the elementary schools. I know that you can say they're stable pods. So our big concern is obviously the high school. But at some point, we're going to have done everything we can do, and we're going to have to weigh it all out. So just, again, those conversations will continue down the road, but I think I covered enough. And I want to thank our community at large. Most people, while I'll identify some of the issues we have, most people are very, very supportive of the process. We know it's inconvenience to everybody. I'm not going to sit here and say this has been a wonderful experience. It hasn't been. Every day is a challenge, both personally and professionally. I think if anybody says it isn't, then I don't know how honest they're being with themselves, but that's a rhetorical question. But these are extremely challenging times. I'm reminded all the time that I need to be patient with people, and I hope people will be patient with me. But again, we're going to keep that laser beam focus on what's in the best interest of students. And I appreciate the support of the committee. You guys have been extremely supportive through this process. There hasn't been political pressure at all. And I say that because that's not the case with all my colleagues. And I thank you so much for that. You allow us to make the best decision we can. I try to strive for win-win scenarios. There haven't been many of those lately, but again, our teachers, when I told somebody the other day, I was talking to them, said we have just a handful of people that are out on medical leave. With the number of staff that we have, it talks about the passion, commitment of our staff across the board. And I can talk about food service and our bus drivers and monitors. We are very blessed in the community of Coventry. I know we're going through challenging times. I know we have budget issues, but we have incredible people who are passionate and care about what they do. They care about their colleagues, and they love their students. And so, we'll get through this together. Again, I just can't thank our staff and our school community and community at large enough. So that will end my long-winded report.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. Were there any questions or comments from the committee? Mr. Florio, did you have anything for Mr. Levis?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mrs. Colonian? You're good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Mr. Pearson, any questions or comments?
I'd just be bloviating at this point. So thank you for the work you and your team are putting in, Mr. Levis, and the entire school, staff. Because you are right, it's challenging times. Still dealing with this in the private sector. Got an email from work saying, yeah, don't even expect to go anywhere near an office, till April at the very earliest, but everyone's whispering September. It's challenging is not even the right word. It's something we'll remember for the rest of our lives, and hopefully it's over soon. I keep saying that, but let's hope it's over soon. So again, thank you everyone for the hard work you're putting into this, and I'm glad you appreciate us not breathing down your neck on it, because we trust you to make the best decisions.
Thank you. I
Ms.
appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson, and I echo everything Mr. Pearson just said. We are so grateful as a committee that our schools are functioning in a way that many other districts aren't. And so that's a credit to all the people who work here, all the teachers, our students, families, everyone. It has been a community effort, and I thank everyone for their efforts. And it's difficult, no doubt, very difficult times. So my hat is off to everyone and all the work that you do. And, try to stay positive. That's the only thing I can say. And just realize that hopefully we will be out of this at some point. And like Mr. Pearson said, I think where I work, we're thinking September, that most of us will return to campus. Before then, I think it's just not going to be a reality. Unless there's some huge vaccine that comes out of somewhere that we're not planning on. And so, yeah, it's going to take a while to get us safe.
And I think that's part of the conflict, to be completely honest, is that, when I sit in meetings and with the Department of Ed or even the Department of Health, and these people are working from home, and yet the pressure is, and I'll be the first to admit, I don't like not seeing kids in school. When I have a miserable day, and just between you and me, every day there's a part of my day that's miserable, right? I seek out kids. I go to a school and walk through, and it just, you know, and I'm an old guy, right? It just brightens my day. But I see our teachers, you know, so there's a conflict here because many people, and then we've heard tonight, like your employers are saying, stay home, yet we're being told we're not good people almost if we're not in, you know, and, you know, people feel the way they feel. My job is to do whatever I can do to take care of our students, our families, and our staff. They are the greatest resource we have, our staff, and I never forget that. So there's this conflict, and I think it's, you know, sometimes it's the elephant in the room, but we have to acknowledge that in education, we're told it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, when other sectors were not. Restaurants aren't able to go, different places that have more controlled environments than we do. Restaurant can control the number, you know, they want us to bring everybody, and we're in Coventry, and that people cannot, you know, even today, on the list in Coventry, or yesterday, we're still 7th in the state, right? 7th in the state. And while things are getting better, you know, we're still 7th in the state. So I never lose sight of that. But again, we have a lot of kids that are struggling. You know, that's why the last thing I'll say is we're going to take whatever money we get from this COVID relief and use it towards supporting students when, you know, when in the summer, whatever we can do, we'll pay staff whatever we can to work with students, and we'll pay private programs. If we can get students going to camp, and we can get our teachers to go and do some work with them, and whatever we can do that's as normal as possible, and that we can do to support our students academically, support our students socially, emotionally, and support our staff. Whatever we can do, I want to use those funds for that first. And so these are challenging times. Nothing's perfect. I don't want to gloss it over. I appreciate everything everybody does, but I'm sure if I'm feeling this way and every day I'm having some really challenging times, I know everybody is, right? So again, I appreciate the support of the committee. You know, I can't imagine what it's like some of my colleagues, and you know, just the pressure they get, and so thank you. I'm a broken record now, but we appreciate the support, and live to fight another day.
Yep, that's our motto. Thank you, Mr. Levis. Mrs. Colonian, did you want to say anything?
No,
I saw that your mic was off. Okay. All right, then we can move on to number 12, which is citizens' comments. So I invite the public to ask any questions or concerns. I don't see any hands up, Mr. Murphy.
There are no hands.
Give him a little bit of time. I think we don't have any comments from the public. So I believe we are ready to schedule our next meeting. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the next virtual meeting of the school committee be scheduled for Thursday, February 25th, 2021 at 6 p.m.
Second the motion.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Catherine Patino,
Yes.
Dave Florio,
Yes.
Donna Colunian,
Yes.
James Pearson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-0. And I have 8:05. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned at 8:05 p.m.
I second the motion.
And I'm just going to have a hand raise on that. Are we all ready to adjourn? It looks like we've got 4-0, so motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Thank you to the public for your attention. And we will see you again on the 25th, it looks like. All right. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Madam.